In today's day and age, the question of whether addiction is a disease or a choice has been an argumentative topic of most conversations within addiction itself. A disease is defined as a disorder or a structure or function in a human, animal, or plant, especially one with a known cause and a destructive group of symptoms, signs, or anatomical changes. As the argument continues, addicts continue to suffer, overdose, and die, while families and children are left to pick up the pieces from the destruction that was caused. The people who can suffer years of active drug abuse question if they are making a daily choice to use, or if their brains are wired differently. Additionally, addiction does not cease on its own. Instead, it requires treatment, similar to a physical disease like diabetes. Skeptics call it a moral dilemma caused by a faulty cognitive behavior, which is a simple decision can deter. Though this subject will never be fully agreed upon, my experience has shown that this disease is only maintained by treatment and prevention. So let's start with the discussion of choice in this modern day and age terms. A choice is defined by an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. Jeffrey Shaler stated, "Many activities are not themselves diseases, can cause diseases, and a foolish self-destructive activity is not necessarily a disease. When we find a parallel between psychological processes and a mental or personal processes can mistakenly assume the psychological processes is what is really going on, and the mental process is just a passive result of the physical process. Understanding Jeffrey and his point of view are imperative in learning that drug abuse is not the same as other regular activities that one would partake in. Although I agree that taking drugs is self-destructive, that is usually not the thought process of an addict experimenting with a drug for the first time. As late teens or early adults typically party, it is to fit in or feel good for that night or for the time being. I believe the process starts its course for an addict instead of just experimenting with drugs at this critical time. An addict, usually with trauma, wants to continue to feel good or continue to numb those feelings and not feel at all. I understand that not all people who suffer from childhood trauma go into a life of drug abuse, which is where I believe the genetics also play a role. Studies show that individuals are predisposed to diseases such as mental illness and substance addiction. Within childhood, the environmental factors that cause substance abuse are heightened. In adulthood, the genetic makeup has more of an impact on the development of addiction. There have been several genes connected to the result of drug abuse, such as some born with a particular gene and others with decreased levels. Although studies show that genetics play almost half of the role in developing addiction, environmental factors also play a role. According to recent studies, environmental factors plays a huge role in addiction among adults. Studies show that there are three primary factors are the effect of pathological families on young people's behavior, easy access to drugs, and the influence of groups of people of the same age. Within 559 people studied, if there was love and warmth within the family dynamic, there were rarely children who find themselves using drugs. The fact that trauma plays a significant piece in individuals who have addiction problems. The sooner that society can change how children are being raised, the more it can cause a substantial decrease in the number of addicts who struggle. The beginning studies of adverse child experiences in 1998 showed a link between childhood traumatic experiences and addictive behavior in adulthood. Children in the first 18 years of their lives who suffer from trauma, such as sexual abuse, neglect, and the loss of a parent, have an increased likelihood of addiction. Also, individuals with traumatic childhoods tend to want to find ways to regulate their mood or quiet intrusive thoughts, resulting in continued drug use. Going back to the definition of a disease. A disease is a disorder or structure or function in a human, plant, or animal, especially one with a known cause and a destructive group of symptoms, signs, or anatomical changes. So who is to say that being diagnosed with the substance abuse disorder is different from any other medical condition, such as diabetes? The American Medical Association classified alcoholism as a disease in 1956 and included addiction as a disease in 1987. In 2011, the American Society of Addiction Medicine also joined AMA, defining addiction as a chronic brain disorder, not a behavior problem or just resulting in making bad choices. So if the American Medical Association and the American Association of Addiction Medicine agreeing that addiction is a disease, why can't the rest of society? Is it because of the trauma of being hurt by addicts and having to go through the turmoil with the addicts in our families? Instead, taking a look within ourselves will find whether addiction is a disease or a choice. An addict can stop using drugs and continue. They cannot stop using drugs and continue on with their lives as if nothing happened and someone is cured. Research shows that an addict needs long-term care and repeated care to stop using. Understanding that one form of treatment may not be proper form for others, quick access to treatment, and addressing all areas of the individuals are just those few things that are crucial in early treatment. I have experience that will show that addiction is a lifelong process and does not happen overnight. Becoming aware of traumas, past experiences, resentments, and rebuilding a life is not easy, but it can be done. I will use the first time that I chose to put a substance in me. I was 13 years old, and several people decided to go to a party to drink. Not knowing where any of our futures would go, thinking that life was perfect, and just wanting to have fun for that night. Now, I will add that I did not enjoy drinking, and at the end stages of my high school parties, I was usually the one caring for all of my sick friends. 20 years later, looking back at that moment, over half of the kids had become addicts and went down a path of self-destruction. The other half lived a normal life, went to college, got married, and had children. So what's the difference between the half that had become addicts and the half that did not? When we all chose the same substance at the same time, at the same age, on the same night. I knew at a very young age that I was different. I felt different from everybody else, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my future. Whenever I chose to take my first pill, the chemical imbalance in my brain told me to continue, that I had it all under control. Before I knew it, I had destroyed the relationships within my family and friends and caused hurt that would continue on for years to come. I was the epitome of a disaster, degrading myself and my character and going against my morals and beliefs to get the next high. I was an empty shell of a human, but I don't typically speak about my active addiction. I choose to share more today about whenever I decided to get clean. I had no idea that the resources were available to me, and at that time, almost 9 years ago, there were few, but I called. I was terrified. I chose to come face to face with the demons that had been winning for years, and I had no idea where to even start. There is help out there, and there is assistance. I have spent the last 8 years trying to better myself in a society that looks down on me because of my diagnosis. Imagine having diabetes and walking down a road and seeing someone and they choose to cross the street and not talk to you. Imagine someone saying they can't live next to me, they're addicts, or let that junkie die, they're the ones who continue to use. Instead, people can be responding with, what can I help you with? Or hey, you're human, and I accept you. Do you need resources as to what is available to you? This is how I choose to live my life today. Helping others in every aspect. Families that have little trust in their loved ones that have lived in addiction with them for years. Showing addicts that there is a new way of life. Helping women to find a root as to why they did the things that they did. Because at the end of the day, what does it really matter if addiction is a disease or a choice? What matters is what we have to do as a society together to fix the problem. I fully believe that as long as society uses stigma and bias towards drug addiction and addicts themselves, the problem will continue with whether addiction is a choice or disease. Gaining knowledge and understanding that people that deal with addictions in everyday life and having compassion will help fight against the war on addiction, the families in turmoil, and the death of so many addicts.